Would you consider Tucker Carlson on your VP list?
Oh, wow. I like Tucker a lot. I guess I would. I think I'd say I would because he's got great common sense.
We got to talk about Trump breaking the internet last night as he walked out with Tucker Carlson at UFC 295. The crowd went absolutely wild.
Well, for some Republicans, this would be the dream ticket. Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson running for the White House. Now, Trump hasn't officially decided on his running mate yet, but turning up at a UFC fight with the former Fox News anchor may be his way of testing the waters. The two men would certainly be a formidable combination against Joe Biden, or whoever takes his place, when Americans go to the polls almost exactly a year from now.
I'm thrilled to be here in the heart of Miami. 7 years ago tonight, the American people delivered the greatest election victory probably that the world has ever seen. The only one that's going to be more important is the one that's coming up in 1 year from now.
Is Donald Trump the inevitable nominee?
Yes, of course.
In the presidential race, less than a year to go now, and a New York Times Siena College poll shows Trump leading in 5 of the 6 most important battleground states.
Battleground states.
Battleground states.
In 5 of the 6, they have Donald Trump ahead.
The legal drama that he's currently faced with has an impact on his political base.
The Biden regime is trying to put their political opponents in jail.
With Donald Trump the clear frontrunner, there's growing speculation over who he'll choose as his running mate.
Have you thought about a potential running mate?
Would you consider Tucker Carlson on your VP list?
Oh, wow. I like Tucker a lot. I guess I would.
Amazing.
For those who don't know, Tucker Carlson is the former conservative TV show host on the Fox network.
He's got great common sense. You know, it's not that we're conservative, we have common sense.
Do you think we're moving towards civil war?
For conservatives in this country, it would be a kind of dream team. For Liberals, it is a nightmare option.
Tucker Carlson for VP. I'm sorry.
We got to talk about Trump breaking the internet as he walked out with Tucker Carlson at UFC 295.
Seeing this had me all the way hyped up.
In the end, they will fail and we will win because we will never stop fighting to save the America we love. I love it.
Of course, before he can race against Joe Biden, Donald Trump has to win his party's nomination, and right now that does look quite likely. He's well ahead of his rivals, including Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, and the rest of the field. They've all been competing in round after round of TV debates, which Trump has wisely stayed away from. They've tended to be rather negative, ill-tempered affairs, which haven't actually helped their standing with the voters.
In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my
before
daughter
preaching to
out of your
anybody else,
voice.
your adult daughter. The next generation of Americans are using it. And that's actually the point. You have her supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's the truth.
You're just
the easy
scum.
answer.
Well, things are getting pretty nasty in those debates, but we remain civil here in the Nexus as we begin our first debate. And today we have Ameshia Cross, a Democratic strategist who's in Washington, and her political opposite, Scottie Nell Hughes, a Republican political commentator who is in Nashville. Welcome to both of you. Ameshia, if I may start with you. Well, Trump and Tucker, a dream ticket for some. They're both master communicators. Biden would really suffer at the polls.
I don't think it's a dream ticket for anyone, honestly, and that they are doing this to garner more media attention. We know Tucker famously was ousted from Fox News, the conservative juggernaut, because he was pushing election conspiracy theory and lies about election fraud that were perpetuated by former President Trump in the lead up to January 6th and honestly after it was over. And Donald Trump himself has mentioned multiple times that he's actually very interested in selecting a woman as his vice presidential candidate. And I think that that would be a strong ticket for the Republican Party. It would showcase that the former president is actually looking at that demographic. Women will make or break this election cycle, as they did the last one, and more women are voting across this country. For Joe Biden, it's a ticket made in heaven. At the end of the day, he wants to challenge former President Donald Trump. He knows and he recognizes that the 4 indictments across multiple jurisdictions, the duplicity of all of the crimes and criminality that former President Trump is charged with, and all of that going on at the same time that he is fundraising, that he is campaigning, that he is trying to get back in office, meanwhile running from the crimes that he's been charged with. All of those things, I think, are going to bode well for President Biden and his reelection. Yeah. And coming off of the election we just saw in the United States last Tuesday, where Democrats roundly showcased, women voters and particularly and people of color showcase that they really do not appreciate Republicans getting at women's reproductive rights and women's reproductive business. Showed that the Biden ticket is one that is going to be a strong
Ameshia, so many points packed into one answer. We need to take them one by one, okay? So Tucker Carlson, thrown out of Fox News, now has more viewers on X than ever. You talked about ethnic minorities. Blacks, according to New York Times, are drifting towards Trump as Biden allies says they have more to do. And as for Joe Biden relishing the chance to take on Trump, I wonder about that because in the latest polls, in 5 out of 6 swing states, Trump is well ahead.
Polls don't vote, people do. And people are going to march with their feet as they did in the last election, as they just did. And I will recall what I said a few moments ago, as they just did last Tuesday in the United States election, showing that they do not support the policies that Republicans are pushing across this country. And a year out of an election, polls have been wrong. And this is not just in the case of Joe Biden. They were wrong a year out when President Obama was in office. They were wrong a year out when President Trump was in office. This is not a new thing. Taking a poll of anyone a year outside of an election, I think, is completely ridiculous.
Fair point.
A year ago, we didn't know that we were a war with Israel in Israel was going to be happening. We don't know what might happen across the United States in the next 3 or 4 months when it comes to economic shifts or housing issues and things like that.
Fair enough. Let's bring in Scottie. Scottie, you want to address some of those points?
You're correct, Matthew. While Ameshia makes a great point, a great Democrat talking point conversation, and she brings up multiple, let's narrow it down to specifically what you start off asking about Tucker Carlson. I think Tucker would make an amazing running mate for Donald Trump. And his ouster at Fox News, the #1 conservative media outlet, is probably a part of the appeal that Tucker Carlson would have not only to Republicans or conservatives, but also independents. He's not afraid to buck the system. You cannot get him to take marching orders like so many politicians do. He's going to do what he feels is right at that moment for the information that he has. And I think that is very appealing to Americans across the board. I think what we're looking at, why you're seeing such a large group of African Americans, like the 22% that are most swing states that are going to look for the first time ever at a Republican candidate, Donald Trump, is because life in America right now is not good under Joe Biden. Crime has risen, education is suffering, healthcare is abysmal. There are issues that over the last 3 years have taken a considerable downturn in America, and I don't care who the Republicans put up at this point. I'm glad to see at this point it looks like it's going to be Donald Trump, possibly Tucker Carlson, maybe a woman. That would be acceptable too. But anybody right now could run against Joe Biden and his record, both foreign and domestic, and would have a pretty good chance of winning. Hence why you're seeing Trump's numbers rise in states that they weren't before.
Ameshia, just quickly pick up on that point about the New York Times reporting that 22% of blacks in 6 swing states are drifting towards Trump. That is far higher than the Republican candidate normally gets, probably about double. How do you explain that?
Anyone who believes that the black vote is going to go to Donald Trump, I think, is completely ridiculous. Black voters have, by and large, stayed very much the stronghold for the Democratic Party. That's not going to change anytime too soon. Black women specifically vote in the 98th percentile for Democrats, with black men shortly behind them at the 95th percentile.
No, but how do you explain the increase in popularity?
It's not about going; it's about the increase. It's unprecedented.
In the primary states for Democrats, in the Democratic primary, Joe Biden reigns supreme. Democrats are registered And a lot of Black voters are registered Democrats. Those registered Democrats will come out and vote for the Democratic nominee, who will be Joe Biden. And I think that any poll that is presenting anything else is going to be egg on the faces of anyone who believes it at this point. And as the only Black person on this panel who works across the Black community specifically, talking to them, hearing what they care about, hearing their policies and the policy initiatives that they want to see move forward. The pandemic was a huge hit specifically for the Black community. And anyone who was in office would have been challenged by that.
Scottie, got one last chance for an answer. 30 seconds.
Blue states are going to be blue states. Red states are going to be red states. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the swing states. And these key states, it's not about Trump or the GOP taking the majority of Black vote. It's taking more than they ever have before. And that right there is historical. And that is happening. And that is something right now that has Democrats running and just going with talking points doesn't work. They're not addressing the real needs of the African-American community. And hence why GOP for the first time ever is seeing a chance at actually being able to bring some of those over across the aisle.
Scottie Nell Hughes and Ameshia Cross, thank you so much for your contributions to the Nexus today. Much appreciated. Well, as we've mentioned, Trump may be doing well in the polls, but he still has massive legal problems to deal with, which could destroy his campaign. The former president says the Democrats are after him for political reasons and have had him indicted more times than Al Capone.
Al Capone was not indicted so much. Alphonse Capone. If you looked at Al Capone in the wrong way, he'd kill you. He was not indicted like me.
In March, Donald Trump became the first former US president to be criminally charged. Since then, he's been indicted 3 more times. The prosecutions are all being led or instigated by Democrats. Proof, Mr. Trump and his supporters say, that his opponents have weaponized the judicial system against him.
What evidence do you have, Dr. Carson, that the Justice Department has been weaponized?
Well, let's put it this way. Al Capone, who was a notorious killer, had 1 indictment, and Donald Trump has 4 indictments.
The 4 criminal cases are in Georgia, Washington, D.C., Florida, and New York. In New York, he's been charged with false accounting relating to a payment to the porn star Stormy Daniels. The prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, was keen to get things started.
Earlier this afternoon, Donald Trump was arraigned on a New York Supreme Court indictment.
Every single pundit and legal analyst said, there is no case. There's no case.
In Georgia, he's accused of interfering with the state's 2020 election results. During the vote count, Trump phoned Georgia's Secretary of State, who recorded their conversation.
Look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes.
The prosecutor, Fannie Willis, believes her case is watertight.
I make decisions in this office based on the facts and the law. The law is completely nonpartisan.
They've got a local racist Democrat district attorney in Atlanta who is doing everything in her power to indict me over an absolutely perfect phone call.
In sunny Florida, Trump's charged with hoarding classified documents and obstructing efforts to retrieve them. Remember the FBI raid on his Mar-a-Lago residence and Palm Beach club. The search warrant was issued by the Attorney General, Merrick Garland.
I personally approved the decision to seek a search warrant in this matter.
The next thing I know, we were raided by many gun-toting FBI agents.
The 4th and final criminal case is in Washington, D.C., where Trump's accused of trying to overturn the entire 2020 election. It relates to the events of January the 6th, when Trump supporters marched on the Capitol.
Go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
The criminal cases in Georgia and New York are state prosecutions. The ones in Florida and D.C. are federal cases brought by the Department of Justice. They're all due to start next year, when Trump ought to be focusing on his presidential campaign. The eminent former Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz thinks it's outrageous.
They're using this as a way to keep him off the campaign trail.
While all 4 criminal trials are due to start next year, the president is already in the middle of a civil case brought by the New York Attorney General, Letitia James. She alleges that Trump and other members of the Trump Organization grossly exaggerated the value of his assets to secure cheaper loans and other financial benefits. In short, fraud.
The statements of financial condition
unfortunately, were inflated, and they were used to enrich himself, his family, and his company. And Mr. Trump may lie, but numbers don't lie.
Trump says Letitia James, who is a Democrat, is politically motivated and insists there's plenty of evidence to back that up.
By any other judge in New York, the trial brought by the corrupt and racist AG, Peekaboo James, would be dismissed and over with. This case should never have been brought. It should never have been allowed. I have no rights.
Letitia James denies the indictment is politically motivated, but there is evidence that she strongly disliked Trump for a very long time.
I'm running for Attorney General because I will never be afraid to challenge this illegitimate president.
The judge in the case, Arthur Engoron, is also a Democrat and ruled before the trial started that Trump did provide false valuations of his assets to various banks. That's right, Engoron ruled that Trump was liable before the trial even began. There's no jury here, and the judge now merely has to decide the punishment.
This week, a judge in New York just ruled, without a trial, without a jury, violating the Constitution, that Donald Trump shouldn't be allowed to even own a business in New York.
On top of that, Donald Trump says that Engoron, who has ruled against him several times in the past, is biased.
This rogue judge, a Trump hater, the only one that hates Trump more is his associate up there, his person that works with him. She's screaming into his ear on almost every time we ask a question. It's a disgrace. You want to know the truth? It's a disgrace.
The Attorney General, Letitia James, wants Judge Engoron to fine Trump at least $250 million and to ban him from doing business in his home state of New York. Analysts say that could effectively end the Trump empire.
Our enemies want to take away my freedom because I will never let them take away your freedom.
Well, is that true or false? Our next two guests have very different opinions about this. James Sample is a law professor at Hofstra University in New York, and Vinoo Varghese is a criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, and a member of the Harvard Law School teaching faculty. Welcome to both of you. Vinoo, if I may start with you. Now, Trump says these criminal and civil cases are simply a political witch hunt. What is your view?
Well, to the extent that these cases have merits, timing is certainly raises eyebrows, to say the least, as to their propriety, as to whether they're valid and legitimate, because you have a man who is the leading Republican contender and likely at this point, if the polls are correct, going to be the next president of the United States. So the question is, why now? Why are these prosecutions going on? And all four of the criminal cases seem to be of a bit of a dubious nature. I think that there are legitimate defenses for all of them. The problem for Trump is the amount. I mean, one alone is bad enough, but to have to deal with four criminal cases and a civil fraud trial that's going on in New York is just a lot for anyone to overcome, maybe even for the Donald.
James, there are multiple cases, and it would seem that the timing is rather suspicious, being that they'll get started in an election year. And that is why a lot of people think that they may be politically motivated. What's your answer to that?
Well, my answer to that, and I completely disagree with Vinoo here, is that the timing is a function of the fact that up until January in 2021, he was the president. You can't have it both ways and say, on the one hand, we cannot criminally indict a sitting president, and then on the next hand say, and it's political if you prosecute the same individual after they're out of office. How exactly are you supposed to prosecute January 6, 2021 before it happens? How are you supposed to prosecute a case in Georgia where the president is on a recorded phone call breaking the law before it happens? How are you supposed to prosecute classified documents being taken from the White House to Mar-a-Lago, moved around in his place of residence, which is also a public club or a private club that the public has access to on a regular basis, boxes of classified documents, including some very, very top secret documents out there for really anyone to access, and then say, oh, it's political to prosecute this. It is a lot for anyone to face one case, one criminal case, one civil case. It's an extraordinary amount to face 4 criminal cases and a civil case. That's a problem of Donald Trump's own creation. And if it seems like those who say these are politically motivated or that the timing is suspicious, were the prosecutors supposed to travel back in time?
Well,
I don't think that would have been.
Could they not have waited until
I can
after
jump
the
in on
election?
this. Yeah, there's actually, as far as the criminal cases go, there's a simple fix for this issue. Knowing who Donald Trump is, there's never been an individual in American history like Trump with his persona and his personality. What they could have done is entered into an agreement with his lawyers to toll the statute of limitations, meaning that they enter an agreement that says, you know what, you waive any defenses to when we could have brought these charges, and then see what happens with the election. If he loses,
no way,
he's fair
so
game.
In other words,
if he wins,
proposal,
he can jump in, and you're gonna have to wait till he's done. I mean, I think that all these cases are insufficient on their face because you have President Biden with documents in his house. You have a number of other people. You also have a situation.
That is a specious argument, to be sure.
You also have a number of people.
Hang on, Vinoo. Let's bring James back in.
That's a specious argument in the extreme. He is essentially wants a get-out-of-jail-free card while he's the president, and then wants to, Vinoo's suggesting we enter into a deferred prosecution agreement in order to toll the statute of limitations until the 2024 election, 4 years after these cases, essentially the fact pattern predicates take place, and 4 years after the president is no longer in office. Nobody in the criminal justice system, nobody is afforded the privileges that Donald Trump has been afforded here. He's 77 years old. Justice delayed would be justice denied. And that's what Vinoo is proposing here.
The integrity of the Department of Justice has been called into question because of the fact that there were no criminal cases against Donald Trump that arose out of the Mueller indictment. You also have a situation where this is with the Durham report, showing that an FBI lawyer lied and was convicted.
What you're seeing here, Matt, is an effort at misdirection. We have cases and we have rules of law, and they'll be the rules of law are being followed. They'll be presented to juries. And what Vinoo is trying to do here is straight out of the Donald Trump playbook. It's all an effort at distraction.
Okay, forgive me. You do what he's doing here. I'm a bit afraid to do this, but let's bring in a third lawyer's opinion. Alan Dershowitz. Now, he accuses Letitia James of selective prosecution in the civil case in New York and says that she must fulfill her promise of getting Trump or she won't get re-elected. So selective prosecution, James, is that what's happening in New York?
No, it's not. This is a civil fraud case involving numbers. The facts in the case are numerical. When you claim you have a 30,000 square foot apartment and you actually have a 10,000 square foot apartment, those are facts. They're verifiable on both ends. The claim is verifiable and the fact is verifiable. Letitia James and the Attorney General's office in New York brings civil fraud claims all the time, and the world doesn't hear about them. Why? Because they don't pay attention to other defendants the way they pay attention to Donald Trump. The reality here is that Donald Trump has been afforded privileges that no criminal defendant is afforded, and yet he still has spokespeople like Alan Dershowitz and proxies like Vinoo who are trying to engage in all manner of distraction when what we have instead is a process that is playing itself out to which this individual facing 91 felony counts is personally responsible for.
Just on the matter of Dershowitz, he says he dislikes him, wouldn't want to vote for him, and wants to see a Democrat come into office, but he says he does want to protect the rule of law and believes it to be selective prosecution because Letitia James could have gone after 1,000 different real estate developers in New York who had inflated the value of their assets. Vinoo, what do you make of the Dershowitz point?
I think you cannot discount, particularly with Letitia James, the political element to this case. Letitia James took out Andrew Cuomo on a lot of Me Too nonsense and did not go after him after in terms of the nursing home scandal with the COVID lockdowns that she should have, but instead took him out on a Me Too. And basically her predecessor, one of her predecessors, were also taken out. Schneiderman and Elliot Spitzer were all taken out on sexual allegations.
To do with the case
she
against Donald
is
Trump.
going
None
after
of it.
Trump because she wants to be governor, right? And she thought taking out Cuomo was her way to become governor. It didn't work out for her because she didn't have the political clout. Now she figures who's bigger to take out than Andrew Cuomo? The Donald.
Just one last question to both of you. James, if Donald Trump is convicted in any of these criminal cases, either civil or criminal, can he still run for president?
Legally, he can still run for president. There is no constitutional bar on a convicted felon running for office of the presidency or even holding the office of the presidency. There would be some practical and logistical difficulties in doing so, but unless he's convicted of insurrection against the United States or treason, he cannot be barred legally from seeking the office of the presidency.
James Sample and Vinoo Varghese, thank you very much for your contributions to the Nexus today. Much appreciated. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. If you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes, do go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus, TRT World. Till next week then, goodbye.